Welcome to session 9. I'm Sashi here, and I will be taking you through this session where we will be considering the gastrointestinal system and some of the homeopathic medicines which have a specific affinity to the system. What is the digestive system? So the functions of the digestive system is, as soon as you ingest food or liquids into the mouth, it goes into the esophagus, to the stomach, to the intestines, and then through this whole process, there is secretions from accessory glands like the liver, the bile, the pancreas, which help in basically the mechanical and chemical breakdown of food into small molecules. That's the main function of the digestive system. So during this process, it starts off with the ingestion of food and liquids, followed by secretion, and the secretion can be of either enzymes or it could just be water. In fact, there's 7 liters of water which is secreted daily. Now you have secretion of water, you have acids, you have buffers, you have enzymes into the lumen of the gastrointestinal tract or GIT. And then you have the actual mixing and propulsion of the food from one area to another. And this mixing and propulsion is brought about by the contraction and the relaxation of the smooth muscles along the walls of the GI tract. And then there is the actual mixing and propulsion, which is, the digestion, which is the mechanical and chemical breakdown. And once it's been broken down into smaller molecules, absorbable size and composition, then there is the absorption. The absorption is could be of ions also, not just the food. So ingested and secreted fluids, ions and small molecules enter into the epithelial cells of the lining of the lumen of the GI tract. And after reabsorption of whatever is required, whatever is not required is defecated. So the waste, indigestible substances, maybe cells shed from the lining of the GI tract, bacteria, all that which is not absorbed, leaves the body through the anus via the process of defecation. Now, I'm not actually going to each one of the, what is the function of the esophagus or stomach. The slide on the image on the slide 3 is self-explanatory. Just have a read of that. So let's go on to the next one. Next slide gives you a picture or image of the stomach and the pancreas. Now, the role of the stomach is to mix the food with the gastric juice, and there's also peristaltic waves which macerate the food. Now, this mixed food, in your books you're going to read it as chyme. Now this goes out through the duodenum. Now, what I would like you to remember is there are 2 sphincters. One is from the esophagus into the stomach, which is a cardiac sphincter, and there's another sphincter which is found on the other end of the stomach, which is the pyloric sphincter. Now, the reason why I'm drawing your attention to this is because we will see in our practice a lot of cases with heartburn, and you may also see people with hernia, maybe sliding hernia or whatever it is. So you've got to know what it is and which sphincter you think is not working well and what is happening. So just remember where it is. The location of it is quite important in when we are dealing with the gastrointestinal system, because anywhere from below the diaphragm onwards is the stomach for a patient. And just make sure that you get that information absolutely right as to the location, so that you have an idea of where they are exactly pointing to. And it may not even be the stomach, it could be the sigmoid colon. Yeah? So just keep that in mind. Learn your locations in situ. Now, the body of the stomach, coming back to the stomach, the function of the stomach is to break down. In the stomach, you have protein being broken down. The enzyme is pepsin, and it breaks down into the protein into amino acids. And there's also some limited absorption of water, ions, and the short chain fatty acids. In fact, alcohol and aspirin is absorbed in the stomach. And then you come on to the pancreas. Now the pancreas is situated just posterior to the greater curvature. If you see the image on slide number 4, you see the greater curvature of the stomach. The pancreas is actually located just posterior to the greater curvature. Now, the pancreas may be divided into the head, the body, and the tail. It's the head of the pancreas which sits snugly on the C-shaped duodenum, and the tail is found on the other end of it. Yeah. Now, the main things that you have to remember is the pancreatic duct, which carries the pancreatic enzymes, joins up with the common bile duct. Yeah, and the two ducts join up before opening into the duodenum, and that is called as the hepatopancreatic ampulla. Okay, now the function of the pancreas is production of the enzymes which help in the breakdown of food. Now let's move on to the small intestine. From the duodenum you go into the small intestine. The small intestine is a long tubular structure which extends, that's a name given for anything that extends from the pyloric sphincter to the ileocecal sphincter. So it consists of the duodenum, which is a small C-shaped tube, and it's not very long. It's a very small piece. Yeah, and then you have the jejunum. Jejunum is slightly longer, which is around 3 feet, and it's called as jejunum because it seems once the word jejunum means empty, and once a person dies, there's no contents found in the jejunum at all, and that's why you have that part of the intestine, small intestine, which is called as jejunum. The biggest part of the small intestine is the ileum, and that measures around 6 feet. Okay, and then it joins the large intestine at a sphincter called as the ileocecal sphincter or valve. Now, ileum actually means twisted. Now, you need this twisting to increase the surface area of the whole intestine. Now, from the small intestine through you have after the small intestine you have the large intestine. In the large intestine there are no enzymes secreted. Okay, you have only mucus. The only thing that is produced in the large intestine may be the vitamin K and B. It is also called, sometimes the large intestine is also called as the colon. Now, the main function of the large intestine is the absorption of water, of electrolytes and vitamins. Now, once the water is absorbed, then it becomes the feces. Now, the bacterial fermentation and the production of gas, etc., is produced due to undigested carbohydrates and proteins. So you have the digestion, the major part of the digestion and absorption taking place in the small intestine, and in the large intestine you have absorption of water, some electrolytes. Okay. Now, the reason why the Bristol stool chart is added is because I wanted to draw your attention to the existence of standardized diagnostic charts like this one. So if once you go out and start practicing and you decide that you've got very good results on some condition, for example, let's say you get very good results treating constipation and you want to write about it in a journal, you've got to write it using the Bristol stool chart. So you just can't say I treated 10 patients having constipation. You've also got to say constipation type 1, type 6, whatever it may be, so that it's that's the universally or internationally accepted chart. And this is something which I would like you to just have a look at, the Bristol stool chart, because you will definitely get patients in clinic coming to you for constipation. So you need to actually know how bad is their constipation. If you were to just ask them, what is the consistency like? And remember, even in the homeopathic repertories, you're going to have rubrics which says hard like pebbles and sub-rubrics like that. So it's better to have an understanding and get as much information from the patient during case taking. Okay, so let's move on to research. The first research that we're going to be looking at is one done on ileus. Now, ileus is the term used when there is an accumulation of gas and there's an absolute paralysis of the intestines. By paralysis, what I mean is there is no peristalsis, there's no movement. So it's just filled with gas, and that is quite painful. Now, in this research, they considered, and this is quite common in patients post-abdominal or gynecological surgery. So what they did was they decided to test whether homeopathic remedies, because were effective in this, and there was no there was no meta-analysis done on the existing clinical trials using homeopathic medicines. So what they did was they took diagnosed patients suffering from post-operative ileus, and they divided them into the meta-analysis. Yeah, they considered the clinical trials into various groups. They subdivided it, and they did a separate meta-analysis in those clinical trials where homeopathic treatment consisted of using homeopathic remedies below a 12C, and that was compared with a placebo or a control where there was no homeopathic remedy given. The second group of meta-analysis looked at clinical trials involving a 12C or a higher potency versus a placebo. Okay, and 5 out of the 6 studies were found to be positive. And what is meant by positive is they considered the time of passing of the first flatus. That means the wind is being dispersed, and therefore there is some kind of a movement in the GI tract. So that was the end point. Yeah, and they found that in patients who were on homeopathic medicines, the passage of the first flatus took place 7.4 hours earlier. Now, the next research that I would like to draw your attention to is one which tried to find out whether the efficacy of homeopathic medicines was due to the medicine or whether it was due to the therapeutic effect of the case taking, that is due to attentive, empathetic listening of the practitioner. And this research gives you a positive result showing that the homeopathic medicines alone brought about a much more positive result than only supportive listening, and also better than just the ordinary conventional care. So although this pilot study suggested that there was a clinical benefit from the individualized homeopathic treatment, attributable to the homeopathic medicines, the number of patients involved were only 100. So it was too small to actually achieve a statistically significant result. And therefore, no proper conclusions could be drawn. So keeping this research in mind, there was another group of scientists who based their research on the protocol done by the research that we just spoke about, done by Kapil. Now this one, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that both these researches was done on IBS condition, irritable bowel syndrome. Now in this, what they did was they did an RCT. They still did that 3-arm study where they took one with conventional treatment, one group with conventional treatment plus attentive listening, and the third one with conventional method plus homeopathy introduced with that. Now this was the same as what Kapil did, but the primary outcome was that between the baseline, that is between the start of the experiment and the end, that is at 26 weeks, they found no statistically significant difference between the 3 arms. But this is what is very interesting to note. But a post hoc test comparing homeopathy plus usual care to usual care alone produced a statistically significant result in favor of homeopathy. So 62.5% of the patients in the homeopathic treatment arm achieved a clinically relevant change in the irritable bowel syndrome symptoms. Whereas in the other arm, which was the usual care, there was only a 25% of the patients who had achieved a relevant change. So therefore, this shows that homeopathy does have some kind of an effect. So there is promise for using homeopathic treatment in conditions like IBS. Now the last research that I'm going to talk to you about is the 3 double-blind trials clinical trials done on children with diarrhea. Now, in each one of these, because the numbers were very small, there was no statistical significance found. So what Jacobs et al. Did was, they combined their 3 double-blind clinical trials into one so that they could get a statistically significant result, because the methodology was all the same. And that yielded a P of 0.008. But some other researchers, like Bonoft and Matheson, they do not actually include all these double-blind clinical trials, into their work as showing positive research present for homeopathy, because they felt that there was an absence of systemic review. And the meta-analysis itself was of their own. One author, one group of researchers were the ones who did all the 3 clinical trials. So they excluded this research from their book on homeopathic research.